Welcome to the Lions Terrors Ministry. This is Reverend Liz Jackson. Today's sermon is Reality and Society. What is the World Bank? Did you know that the world has its own banking system? The system is what controls the countries. They determine who gets help. Have you ever stopped to wonder why the nations of Haiti or Venezuela aren't being sent aid properly whenever they face disastrous tsunamis or, hurricanes or just, civil unrest? Have you ever wondered why there's so many immigrants trying to get into the United States from South America? Well, if you haven't asked these questions, you need to start questioning everything. For the reason why Abba Yah has to come and destroy the world the way it is because of the World Bank, amongst other reasons, but one reason is the World Bank. So here is a brief history of the World Bank. It was conceived in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Monetary Conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The World Bank's initial aim was to help rebuild European countries devastated by World War II. Its first loan was to France in 1947 for post-war reconstruction. Soon, however, other actors began to take over the role of reconstruction support, and the bank shifts its attention to the needs of its members in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. In the 1950s and 60s, the funding of large infrastructure projects such as dams, electrical grids, irrigation systems, and roads was the bank's primary focus. In the 1970s, the bank shifted its attention to poverty eradication. Development projects reflected people-oriented objectives rather than exclusively the construction of material structures. Projects related to food production, rural and urban development, and population health and nutrition were designed to reach the poor directly. Bank operations also expanded to identify and encourage policies, strategies, and institutions that help countries succeed. The banks initiated sectorial and structural adjustment loans deemed necessary for the success of its projects. And this was taken from the worldbank.org, in which you yourself can Google and read upon. So my question to you is this. We have been hearing that the unholy Roman Catholic government is to help eradicate poverty. We just now read that the world has its own bank that's designed to help eradicate poverty. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that every country everywhere has poor people, and it's now winter of 2021, and we're under a pandemic that are still out in the street freezing and starving to death. So if these organizations were really doing what they say that they're doing, then there should never have been, or never should be, still homeless people out in the street, people struggling day to day, trying to figure out where their next meal's coming from, if they even get to eat at least once a week, if they have good, clean water to even drink. These things should have been taken care of if it was, again, the bank's primary focus or the unholy Roman Catholic government's primary focus. They have enough money to work together. And considering the unholy Roman Catholic Church is part of the United Nations, there should never be a hungry child, ever. So let's continue. The World Bank is an international financial institution that provides loans to countries of the world for capital projects. It comprises two institutions, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and the International Development Association. The World Bank is a component of the World Bank Group. The World Bank's stated goal is the reduction of poverty. So again, it's 2021 and we have more homeless people on the planet than what we probably ever had before, because again, we're under a pandemic and no one has told landlords and, other banks to not foreclose on people. They do it anyway. Bill collectors are going to have access to you via your Facebook and your Instagram accounts. Not just being able to call you on the phone, they're going to be able to track you through social media. So again, if these groups were doing what they say they are doing, we wouldn't be having 12,000 or whatever I saw on the news this morning, mass amount of immigration coming to the United States again, because the World Bank would have helped South America and stabilize the countries that are in desperate need of stabilization. But you still have corruption in this world, so things are never going to be stabilized until the Lord God Almighty Abba Yah comes back. Number two, the president of the bank is the president of the entire World Bank Group. The president, currently Jim Young Kim, is responsible for chairing the meetings of the board of directors and overall management of the bank. Traditionally, the president of the bank has always been a U.S. citizen, nominated by the United States, the largest shareholder in the bank. So again, my tax dollars go to this group who is doing nothing but causing more poverty. And you will see what I'm talking about in just a moment. The largest shareholder in the bank, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, having always been a European. And we're going to look at the International Monetary Fund in a separate sermon. The nominee is subject to confirmation by the Board of Executive Directors to serve for 5 years, renewable term. While most World Bank presidents have had banking experience, some have not. The vice presidents of the bank are its principal managers in charge of regions, sectors, networks, and functions. There are 2 executive vice presidents, 3 senior vice presidents, and 24 vice presidents. The board of directors consists of the World Banking Group president and 25 executive directors. The president is the presiding officer and ordinarily has no vote except a deciding vote in case of an equal division. The executive director, as individuals, cannot exercise any power nor commit or represent the bank unless specifically authorized by the board to do so. With the term beginning November 1st, 2010, the number of executive directors increased by 1 to 25. So that was from Wikipedia on the World Bank. And as you can see, the World Bank determines what areas get help and when. And this is vital to know because as a taxpayer, your money goes to this government organization. And again, we will discuss the things the World Bank does, like privatize water, for example, and the IMF. So you need to understand who are the founders of the World Bank as to understand why they don't uphold what they're supposed to be doing. John Maynard Keynes, he was a sex addict, and you can find this at independent.co.uk, Here's the link right here. I've been on information that I take from the internet, adding links to some of these sermons so that you can go directly to the information. Basically, Keynes collected and cataloged his sexual activity as obsessively as other men did postage stamps. Indeed, that was an early hobby of his, make it what you will. He kept detailed records of encounters with names or initials of partners allocated by year from 1901. His first sexual experience with a fellow Etonian at the age of 17, though the classification had ceased by 1925 when he married the Russian ballerina Lydia Lepakov. He was an author. Treatises on probability and Indian currency featured the all-seeing eye and pyramid on the cover. If you don't know what the all-seeing eye and pyramid mean, then please do your homework and look into it. Esoteric symbolism is important, and there will be some sermons on that. I have one on the Oreo with the cross of Lorraine. When you understand how people communicate, it's not just with words, but with symbols. And symbols matter just like definitions of words matter. Keynes was a Freemason. From a quote made by John Maynard Keynes, the eminent economist, who spearheaded a revolution in economic thinking, stated, "The difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones." Sometimes the old ideas are the best, because right now in 2021, they're trying to abolish the Constitution. I, for one, value my free speech and being able to practice my spirituality and connect with Abba Yah without the government telling me I cannot do so. But again, our liberties are being stripped away, and it goes to people like John Maynard Keynes, who believe the difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping the old ones. If we don't learn from our past, we are destined to repeat it. He was a Cambridge Secret Society member of the Apostles, and the Apostles is a secret society of Cambridge University. The members that meet to discuss and debate such topics as truth, God, and ethics. The thing about that is, what God do they believe in? The group, also known as the Cambridge Conversation Society, was founded in 1820 by George Tomlinson. Tomlinson went on to become the first bishop of Gibraltar. Despite its university foundations, the group's influence went well beyond Cambridge, and many eminent Victorians, Edwardians, and Gregorians belonged to it. Since its foundation, the society has included some of the most influential men in British public life: John Maynard Keynes, Leonard Woolf, Lytton Strachey, and his brother James, G.E. Moore, and Rupert Brooke were all apostles. Many members of the Bloomsbury group were also apostles, Keynes, Woolf, and Lytton Strachey being the best known of them. So what's his actual view on the Lord God Almighty? Keynes' economics, like his religion and sexual perversion, are best understood as a reaction against the Christian worldview. That Keynes identified the 19th century advocacy of laissez-faire or free market economies with the Christian worldview is clearly shown by an essay he wrote in 1926 called "The End of Laissez-Faire." In it, he disdainfully quotes from an 1850 Christian pamphlet entitled "Easy Lessons for the Use of Young People which says that true liberty is that every man should be left free to dispose of his own property, his own time and strength and skill in whatever way he himself may think fit, provided he does no wrong to his neighbors. Okay, well, we're going to see how two-faced that man is here in just a moment. Not only did he have sexual perversions and his reaction against Christian worldviews, because the free market economies never helped people. You need to understand that free markets have never helped anybody but those who practice capitalism and are in control and run monopolies. They have never helped the common person. Who is Harry Dexter White? Harry Dexter White helped establish the World Bank, and he was a spy. A spy from the was a Soviet informant who served as a senior U.S. Treasury Department official. Imagine that. Working closely with the Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau Jr., he helped set American financial policy toward the Allies of World War II, while at the same time he passed numerous secrets to the Soviet Union, which was an American ally. He was the senior American official at the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference that established the post-war economic order. He determined the conference and imposed his vision of post-war financial institutions over the objections of John Maynard Keynes, the British representative. At Bretton Woods, White was a major architect of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. More influence as a spy. Russia is the first instance of a Soviet economy in action, and it works. These were the words not of a Bolshevik revolutionary or left bank intellectual, but the American who wrote the rules of international finance for the 20th century, Harry Dexter White. White was the U.S. representative at the Bretton Woods Conference, birthplace of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. So, a couple years ago, we hear about Russia collusion and Russia this and Russia that. Well, when you have spies doing insider trading on information, what do you expect? And this man, a spy for Russia and the United States, wrote the World Bank and International Monetary Fund policies. So what do you expect to have in the world when you have spies and Freemasons and secret societies running it? The normal person who is going broke, trying to pay their rent and sustain life, pays taxes to these dirty people. That's not the way the world was supposed to be. Abba Yah did not create the world the way it is now. And the way it is now is being ran by Ephesians 6:12. Those principalities and rulers in high places. And those that rule this international bank and World Bank are demonic entities controlling people. And the more you understand that, the more it will become an aha moment for you as to why the world is being destroyed right now. Brothers and sisters, things could be in place if people would run the world properly, but they're not going to because of greed, hate, and envy. So Harry Dexter White had a CIA case built against him. Harry Dexter White was a longtime Treasury Department official and Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Henry Morgenthau in 1945 through 46, who along with John Maynard Keynes was a principal architect of the Bretton Woods multilateral trading system. Confessed spies and FBI informants Whittaker Chambers and Elizabeth Bentley accused White of having seen a Soviet agent or of having been a Soviet agent of influence while in the government. The declassified Venona decrypts of Soviet diplomatic traffic during the 1940s appears to have confirmed such charges. Craig takes a different view. While not necessarily arguing White's innocence, the author suggests that the charges of White's detractors were misplaced. He argues that White represented no more than a trusted individual to the Soviets, and that his actions can be explained by his belief in a Rooseveltian internationalism predicated on continued Soviet-American cooperation. Now, to read more on that, you can visit the CIA.gov website. White helped turn Germany into an agricultural country. Morgenthau soon appointed White to act as liaison between the Treasury and the State Department on all matters pertaining to foreign relations, and made responsible for the Exchange Stabilization Fund. In many ways, Morgenthau was dependent on White. According to Morgenthau's son, White was the principal architect behind the Jewish-constructed Morgenthau Plan, an infamous post-war revenge program designed to permanently weaken Germany's military capabilities. As authorized by White, the plan took entire industries out of Germany, eliminated its armed forces, took away its working population as slave laborers, and converted the country into an agricultural community. The process was designed to decimate Germany's economy and its ability to start another war. A version of the Morgenthau Plan that was limited to turning Germany into a country primarily agricultural and pastoral in its character was signed by Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill during the Second Quebec Conference in September of 1944. And you can read more on that at the renegadetribune.com. Mind you, the entire time Germany is being destabilized so that they can't start another war, the United States is employing Nazis as scientists and establishing NASA. So you can't have it both ways. Again, two-faced hypocrisy. Involved in causing Pearl Harbor, Harry Dexter White, a top advisor to Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau Jr. and President Franklin Roosevelt, is remembered chiefly as the architect of the Bretton Woods Conference that created the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, but he also played a key role in bringing about the Day of Infamy by doing everything within his power to scuttle the peace efforts of the forces within the Japanese government that were striving to avoid war with the United States. White authored an ultimatum adopted as official policy by FDR that upped the ante of belligerent acts Roosevelt was directing at Japan. Or belligerent acts, sorry. That says belligerent acts Roosevelt was directing at Japan. White's plan was calculated to inflame public opinion in Japan and undermine Emperor Hirohito and Prime Minister Prince Fumimaro Konoye, both of whom favored peace with the United States. It was also aimed at guaranteeing the rise of power of Japan's political forces that were beating the drums for war. This is precisely and predictably what happened. However, White did not undertake this move on his own initiative. It is important to note, but as a directive of the NKVD, an earlier name for the Soviet KGB. His Kremlin bosses were most anxious for assurance that Japan would not attack the Soviet Union. They thus expanded great efforts through their spy and propaganda networks in Japan, Europe, and the United States to ensure that Japan would strike America rather than the USSR. And this is from www.thenewamerica.com, where they do have their cited sources, so please read that. So why does all that matter? There are over 189 countries that are partners in this criminal corruption. And some of these include Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Angola, and it may not pertain to Afghanistan anymore because guess what? It doesn't seem like Afghanistan is getting any World Bank help, even though it's a member. And we're going to learn why here in just a moment as well. But Austria, Australia, of course, the United States, and you can learn more at worldbank.org about its members. The World Bank has the power to control everything. The bank is run like a giant cooperative where its members are shareholders and is operated for the benefit of those using its services. The number of shares a country has is based roughly on the size of its economy. The United States is the largest single shareholder, followed by Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and France. The rest of the shares are divided among the other member countries. So there are the controlling factors of this World Bank. Of course, the United States, because the United States has its hand in everything. And you can read more about that at theworldbank.org. Africa and the World Bank. Whether in Latin America, Asia, or Africa, the story has been the same. The destabilization of peasant producers by a 1-2 punch of IMF, World Bank, structural adjustment programs that gutted government investment in the countryside, followed by the massive influx of subsidized U.S. and European Union agricultural imports after the WTO's agreement on agricultural pride open markets. African agriculture is a case study of how doctrinaire economics serving corporate interests can destroy a whole continent's productive base. And for more information on that, visit fpif.org, Destroying African Agriculture. That's why Africa can't flourish, is because of the open markets. And you either have a choice of U.S. subsidies and imports or European Union subsidies and imports. Africa has to rely on what the other world's viewpoints are rather than what's in the best interest for Africa. And it's just like other nations, again, Latin America, Asia, same thing. When you have people who do not even live in your country telling you what to do, that's a problem. Argentina. Argentina was considered by the IMF to be a model country in its compliance to policy proposals by the Bretton Woods institution. However, it experienced a catastrophic economic crisis in 2001, which was caused by the IMF. Induced budget restrictions, which undercut the government's ability to sustain national infrastructure in crucial areas such as health, education, and security. The IMF intervened to ensure its loans would be repaid and enforced a set of reforms to achieve this. Argentina was ordered to structurally change their economy to concentrate on exports in order to raise enough money to pay off their debts. Argentina was forced to remove all barriers to foreign trade and enter the global market. and this resulted in the collapse of many local Argentine companies, as economically Argentina was not ready. Argentina was forced to request further loans to feed its population, which actually led to a nationwide looting in 2001. In December 2001, on the verge of economic meltdown, Argentina defaulted on its $93 billion debt. So the very structure that is supposed to help prop up countries and stabilize them wanted their money and destroyed Argentina. That is why so many people are fleeing South America right now, because the World Bank, the IMF are trying to collect on the debts and the loans that they gave these countries. And the poor in South America are just getting poorer. People are not doing as they are supposed to be doing. Here's another example. In Indonesia, the World Bank in 1976 introduced a transmigration program in Indonesia. This project was funded after the establishment of the bank's OESA Environmental Office in 1971. Transmigration B was the largest resettlement program ever attempted and designed ultimately to transfer over a period of 25 years 65 million Indonesians, 165 million inhabitants from the overcrowded island of Java, Bali, Madura, and Lombok. The World Bank's objectives were relief of the economic and social problems of the inner islands, reduction of employment on Java, relocation of manpower to the outer islands, the strengthening of national unity through ethnic integration and improvement of the living standard of the poor. The project was a resounding failure. It failed as the new settlements went out of control. The local population fought with the migrators, and the tropical forests were devastated, destroying the lives of indigenous peoples. Many of the settlements were established in inhospitable sites, and the funding continued through 1987, despite the problems noted and despite the bank's published stipulations in 1982 concerning the treatment of groups to be resettled. Why should a bank ever tell people where they can and cannot live? 165 million inhabitants. Sure, the islands are crowded, but when you ask for help, the option isn't to uproot people from the place that they only know. Three, when you don't pay a loan, the result is economic collapse. Better known as austerity measures, austerity is a set of political economic policies that aim to reduce government budget deficits through spending cuts and tax increases, or a combination of both. Austerity measures are often used by governments that find it difficult to borrow or meet their existing obligations to pay back loans. So here's the economic effects of austerity measures. Many aggregate demanded models in economics suggest a relatively simple relationship between a government's budget and economic activity. That is, austerity measures lead to depressed consumption and economic output. But some studies suggest that the relationship between austerity and economic activity is nonlinear and depend on many outside factors, which makes these effects uncertain. Political effects. Aside from the fiscal effects, austerity measures can have a number of effects on a country's policies. Since most austerity measures target developmental and social spending, social unrest is one of the most common after effects of austerity implementation. For instance, Greece saw a number of violent protests to measure undertaken in 2011 and 2012. Social effects. Austerity measures also have a big impact on everyday life since government tends to be both large employers and social nets. For instance, the Family and Parenting Institute projected that median household incomes in the UK would fall in real terms by 4.2% over the 5 years following the government's cutbacks in 2011. Now that you know the backers of these countries, you can see why economies fail. Nobody comes to bail them out. The World Bank claims that they're here to eradicate poverty, but they do just the opposite. They destabilize countries without caring about the people who live within them. Again, when you have nations like the United States and the United Kingdom telling other countries what to do, that's a big problem. No country should tell another what it can and cannot do. Now, common sense says you shouldn't build bombs and nukes and, stuff like that, because who wants to nuke each other and then everybody just dies? Like, there's common sense to this, brothers and sisters. But the thing about this is, when you have power like this to go and say, hey, I'm going to give you this loan, and I'm going to set these terms and conditions, and when I come and collect on this loan, if you can't pay me back, then you can't have a country. And that's the sum of the World Bank. That's to summarize their actions. They're going to give you the money, hope you fail, so then they can come in and implement policies and watch your government get destroyed and force you into a free market like they did with Argentina that was not ready, or like they did in Indonesia. Instead of building new infrastructure for the overcrowding, quote unquote, because who really knows if the island was overcrowded or not, because do they really care? That's the question. Why would you move 165 million people and then think that they're going to be able to thrive and reestablish from the only home that they know? It's time to wake up, brothers and sisters, because the world's on fire for a reason. And one of these reasons is because of the World Bank and the IMF and the unholy Catholic Roman government. Because, again, it's January 18th, 2021, and all these entities have been around since World War II, 1976, so on and so forth. And the poor just keep getting poorer, and the homeless just keeps growing. So obviously, there's an agenda here, and that's the destabilization of the world. So entities like the United States and the United Kingdom can come in and establish what they feel and what they want. Again, open markets. It's all about capitalism and the mighty dollar. Rich get richer, poor get poorer. Sure, Joe Biden's $15 an hour minimum wage Sounds really, really good. How is that going to be funded when businesses now are barely afloat? We have to start applying common sense to things, brothers and sisters. And one of these things that you need to wake up to is the world has its own bank for destruction and chaos, and that's what it causes. There should be no reason Africa isn't flourishing due to its own agricultural infrastructure. It doesn't need US or European Union imports. It should be able to flourish and trade within its own borders. But again, when we remain blind and when we buy what the media is telling us and we just go about our everyday lives without the concern from others because you're too wrapped up in making it yourself, we have a problem. We need to start thinking about others. We can't just continue down the same path of destruction and chaos, because by doing that, the day of the Lord will come. Again, he was going to destroy Nineveh, but everyone repented and turned back. I'm afraid, and I know that there's too much corruption in the world today for everyone to repent and actually mean it, because the entities that control the governments and organizations like the World Bank, as you read, sex addicts and spies. A spy who was involved in causing Pearl Harbor. Those are the types of people that run this world. The world has nothing for me. The Lord God does. Abba Yah promised end of destruction and chaos. And in him, I am hopeful, because the governments, they don't care about you. And it's time you wake up to that truth.